Hello, fellow Rebel Capitalists. Hope you're well. So the new jobs numbers just released. They're going to completely blow your mind. But I think they are highly, highly suspicious. And I think they actually reveal something about what the Biden administration is going to be doing throughout the rest of 2024. One word: shenanigans. Let's get right over to CNBC and check this out. Let me do my screen share. Josh was just going to remind me that I forgot to do that. Okay, here we go. Drum roll, please. U.S. payrolls increased by 216,000 in December, much better than expected. I'll say they're expecting 170,000, and they got 216. So I know a lot of you right now are saying, George, you got me again. Why did you use that thumbnail? You're just all about clickbait. Unsubscribe. And then you got to write me a message in the comments letting me know that you unsubscribed. But there's a reason. There's a reason, a very legitimate reason we used that specific chart in the thumbnail. Because like I said at the beginning of this video, the devil is in the details. So on surface level, yes, oh my gosh, the jobs numbers are phenomenal. But I wonder what the revisions are the last few months, and that's where we get into the accuracy of that thumbnail. But before we get there, let's get into the key talking points. December's jobs report showed employers added 216,000, and the unemployment rate stayed at 3.7%. That compared with respective estimates 170 and 3.8. Hiring boost came from, and here's where we get into what I think the Biden administration is going to be. One of the things that the Biden administration is going to be doing throughout the rest of 2024 to really kind of juice the numbers going into the election. 52,000 came from government jobs. Isn't that convenient? You know, it's when you step back and you're like, well, wait a minute here. The government can basically create whatever job number they want, even if they're not fudging the numbers. They say, we want high job number. Great. Hire another 50,000 people. No problem. We can sell as much 10-year treasury debt as we want because it's 100 basis points or 125 basis points under Fed funds. So what's the problem? Why don't we just keep selling these treasuries and just hire more and more and more people? And magically, we'll have a booming job market. It's amazing how that works, isn't it? But then what you have to understand is what my good buddy Peter Schiff points out all the time, that all jobs are not created equal, because you have government jobs that usually reduce productivity, and you have private sector jobs that increase productivity. But getting back to the report, average hourly earnings rose 0.4 on the month, and we're up 4.1 from a year ago, both higher than respective estimates. Okay, so for the worker, that's great news. That is absolutely good news. And especially because the inflation rate is down, call it 3%. So if we're humming right along at nominal job or nominal income growth at 4% and inflation's 3%, all right, we've got real wage growth. And again, I want to be as fair as I possibly can. That is really, really, really good. That's what we want. Unfortunately, the bond market is telling us it's not likely to continue. We'll save that for a separate video. Okay, so let's get into this chart. U.S. unemployment rate, as I said, it went back down. It was up around 3.9, went back down to 3.7. So usually this would be an indicator that I need to step back as someone that has been, his base case is for recession, hard landing in 2024. I need to step back and say, okay, well, This is definitely a data point that would suggest I'm wrong. Absolutely. We've got to be as rigorous in our objectivity as we possibly can be. And we always have to try to poke holes in our base case. How can I be wrong? How can I be wrong? How can I be wrong? That's one thing that I really noticed when I go to St. Bart's and I hang out with all these hedge fund managers. It's really weird because they can do two seemingly opposite things simultaneously. And what I mean by that is they can have massive conviction for one thing, but yet at the same time, they're always like trying to poke holes in that to see how I could be wrong or how I could be wrong on the timing. So, anyway, getting back to the report here. Here's what just basically another chart that shows the job creation and what it has been since January of 2022. Say the report along with here we go. The report along with revisions to previous months counts brought 2023 job gains to 2.7 million. Now here is where we get into the nuance, which I think is far more important than the headline number. Right? Because what's weird for some is Wall Street, they just pay attention to that headline. That's it. And they completely ignore everything else. When usually the most important details are in the part of the report that everyone completely ignores. It's bizarre. So getting into the nitty-gritty before we get into the revisions, hiring 52,000 government, 38,000 healthcare, hospitality, leisure and hospitality, 40,000 social assistance. Sounds like government. 21,000 construction, 17, retail, 17. As the industry is mostly flat since 2022. All right, on the downside, transportation, warehousing saw a loss. See, again, that doesn't make any sense to me. If the economy was doing well as a result of all these people having jobs, you'd be transporting goods back and forth across the United States. So to have transportation, now I'm sure there's multiple variables here, but you would assume that transportation, you would not be seeing a loss of jobs there. And if you guys remember the videos from a couple months ago, we were talking about pretty much not everyone, but a lot of these major trucking companies have gone bust, such as Yellow, which was always weird because it had an orange logo. Anyway, getting back to this report, we see that wages have gone up. Very, very good news. And they talk about how this could lead to higher inflation expectations moving forward. Here's a quote from Andrew Patterson, senior international economist at Vanguard. Today's report speaks to the bumpy road ahead for the Fed's journey back to 2% inflation. And this goes back to the Phillips curve, the Phillips curve, the Phillips curve. Are we talking about the Phillips curve again? Something that has literally been debunked going all the way back to the 1970s. And we're still, you know what? The Phillips curve is very similar to the argument that women make 70 cents on the dollar. It's like, guys, we disproved that just literally decades ago. But yet people just still say it as though it's just common fact. It's crazy. Anyway, now let's get into what I think is the most important part of the overall jobs report, which obviously I should have highlighted and I didn't. Where is the report? The revisions. Here we go. Payroll growth showed a sizable gain from November's downwardly revised 173,000 jobs. And get this, October also revised. Now, keep in mind, this payroll report that we're seeing today, that would have been for the month of December, right? So November and October were the two that preceded this report that we got today. October also revised lower to 105 from 150,000. So I don't know how we can get excited about a headline number at 216 when they're literally downward revising every single month, and not by a little bit. And this goes back to our thumbnail. By massive amounts. Look at this. They're revising it by 40, meaning October, by 45,000 jobs. 45,000, guys. That's a downward revision of, I'm no mathematician, but a downward revision of what, 30%? 35%? What are we doing here? So let's, for a moment, assume that this 216 gets downwardly revised, like pretty much every single month has for the last 2 years or whatever. But let me whip out my handy calculator on my phone, and let's do the math. So 216, well, I'm just going to do times 0.3. So a 30% downward revision on 216 would be 64,000. Okay, so let's think this through. If we have 216 minus, what was that, 63, we'll just call it 60. 216 minus 60, now we're down at 256, right? And expectations were, what, 170? So you see where I'm going with this, that every single month you have these downward revisions to where the downward revisions are most often a lot lower than expectations. So what would be happening to the market? What would the narrative be? And that's what this is all about. This is a narrative game that I think the administration is playing. And it's not, look, I don't want to just single out the Democrats here. Trust me, if Trump was in office right now, he would be doing the exact same thing. And in fact, Trump would probably do it even more than Biden is, for heaven's sakes. They all juice the numbers. It goes back to the story of the only conversation that I've ever had with my father about politics. Most of you have probably heard it, but this is before he passed in 2005. I was sitting there watching TV with him, and we were watching a documentary on all of these American presidents. And my father, for those of you who don't know, was born in 1914. So he's obviously very old when he had me. He flew planes in World War II and whatnot. Just an incredible man. But he had seen all these presidents throughout his life, all the ones that we read about in the history books. And so I asked him, I said, Dad, who was your favorite president? And he just looked at me and he said, none of them. I said, well, that's not really the question. I go, there's got to be one that you liked. And he always called me Georgie boy, was what he always called me. And he just looks at me and gives me this stare. He says, Georgie boy, they're all crooks. And so that he just threw them all in the bucket of just being dishonest crooks. So that's why he didn't like any of them. That's my point. That the only way you can get to be president is if you're good at lying. I mean, think about it. You can't just sit there and say that Donald Trump or any of these other guys are just holier than or as pristine as the driven snow or whatever. I mean, come on. You might like Trump or any of these other people, but let's just be honest for a moment. The way that you get to be president is by being very, very good at lying and not have any ethics or morals. You don't have an ethical North Star, right? That's how you get to be president. That's what makes you a good politician, like the definition of a good politician. So anyway, I want to get off on that tangent, but every single president would be doing the same thing here. So I think that we're going to see more and more of this throughout 2024 where these jobs numbers are as magic. Oh my God. Whoa. Holy cow. Did you see the job numbers? Yeah, but they downwardly revised last month by 30%. That doesn't matter. Forget about last month. What are you talking about last month? Who cares about last month? Downward revision. What are you, fear mongering? No, let's just look at this one, the headline number that we have right now. Let's just focus on that and ignore everything else. And why? Because it's all narrative. I mean, I would say the majority of the decision making in the stock market is just narrative driven. It's all storytelling. In fact, I wrote down on a Post-it note the other day that, and you, once you start to understand YouTube, you understand the power of story. You understand the power of narrative. And I actually wrote down something that I remember. I wrote it down because I wanted to remember it. But I think that whoever has the best story wins. And I think that's in politics. I think that's in the hedge fund business. If you look at what's the difference between Cathie Woods and Jim Chanos. If you didn't know this, Jim Chanos shut down his fund a few months ago. Jim Chanos, right? And you say, well, maybe he had bad returns. Bad returns? Look at Cathie Wood from her peak. Yeah, sure, she had a good year last year, but she's still down like 80%. So why is it that money's just flooding into Cathie Woods and flooding out of Jim Chanos? It's not performance. It's narrative. Who is telling a better story? The best story wins. And that's something that these politicians know very, very well. So I think they're going to do everything they can to try to manipulate the story or the narrative in their favor in 2024. And that's something we need to be very cognizant of. And I think this jobs report is evidence of that front and center. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. As always, make sure that you're standing up for freedom, liberty, free market, capitalism. If you want to check out my game plan, my financial game plan for my own portfolio for 2024, you can actually check that out. It's like an hour and a half long deep dive that I did. And you get the link for free. It's at georgegammon.com/2024. And we'll see you in the next video.